Let's start dissecting the admissions process at the Ivy League and other highly competitive schools to get a better understanding of what's really going on. You want to start looking at this college admissions game, and yes, it really is a game, from the admissions officer's point of view. As I already pointed out, the Ivy League schools are in the driver's seat just by virtue of how many applicants they have for a limited number of spots. And still, each school is competing for the very best of the crop. Part of what differentiates the Ivy League schools is that they boast a class which is not just bright in terms of grades and SAT scores, but one full of intellectual, regional, cultural, and national diversity. So not only do Ivy League schools like to brag about how many valedictorians are in each class, and it's not unusual for an Ivy League class to be comprised of 40% or more valedictorians, but they like to talk about the fact that each class has students from all 50 states and from something like 20 different foreign countries. Having a student who is best in the country or the world at most anything gives a school bragging rights, which is why even if your SATs are not perfect, but you are a world-class surfer, you just might get accepted to Harvard or Stanford. And if you think that all the famous offspring of celebrities who get accepted to the Ivies have perfect grades and SAT scores, think again. When Brown accepted John F. Kennedy Jr. and more recently Emma Watson of the Harry Potter movies, or when Yale accepted Jodie Foster, or when Princeton accepted Brooke Shields, they did it because it was good for their business. Famous students add prestige to a class, and after all, the Ivy League brand is all about prestige, right? Isn't that why students want to attend the Ivies in part, for the prestige? Ivy League schools also like to boast what a high percentage of incoming freshmen actually graduate 4 years later. So it's not in an admissions officer's interest to accept a student who can't measure up. Students who fail reflect badly on the school they flunk out from. For this reason, even athletes have to meet certain minimum academic standards, even at the Ivies. This might be a good time to mention the academic index, which is a somewhat secret formula the Ivy League schools use to weed out applicants. The academic index is derived from a formula that takes into account a student's SATs, SATs 2s, and class ranking, or grade point average when rankings are not provided. There's a raw score, and then different schools create a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 9 ranking based on that raw score. It turns out that if your raw score is between about 200 and 210, you have a significantly smaller chance of being accepted to any of the Ivies than if you have an academic index of about 211 or above. Even exceptional athletes that an Ivy League school might want to have on their team still needs an academic average of at least 170 or 180. Like I said before, the Ivy League school does not want to accept an athlete that can't handle the work and ends up flunking out. Calculating your exact academic index is important, and it's one of the first things I do when I work with a student one-on-one. That way you get a sense of exactly what you need to score in your SAT and SAT 2s to be competitive at a specific school. The whole academic index is not something admissions officers like to talk about because they like to portray the fact that they evaluate each applicant in a completely holistic way. And if students knew that without a certain academic index score their chances were virtually nil, they probably wouldn't bother applying. Which would mean first, a lot less income for the school from application fees. 20,000 applications a year at $50 a pop comes out to $1 million a year in revenue for an Ivy League school. And if you think these schools spend a whole lot of time on applications with academic indexes below their threshold, I think you're being a bit naive. So now that I've laid out some of what is going on behind the scenes in the admissions office, let's start talking about what a student can do to better fit into the Ivy mold. Again, for those who are taken back by the idea of fitting a student into the Ivy mold, realize that's exactly what you need to do in order to get accepted. It's the same thing when you want to get a job at a prestigious firm or buy a co-op in a prestigious building. You need to get into their club, and they want members who are pretty much like their other members.